here's two questions for you. One, can you explain a little bit about when you say New York and Boeing overturned for the
Bruen
Brewing
decision.
Brewing decision. If you could talk a little bit about that, and then why don't we start there, and then I'll ask the next one.
Okay.
Actually. So
the Bruen decision in June of 2022 basically overturned a lot of the restrictions on. They basically said you can't infringe on the Second Amendment. In New York, Massachusetts, a number of other states had very restrictive policies on issuing what we call LTC here in Massachusetts, a license to carry. It used to be that they didn't, even though you had no criminal record, you're an upstanding citizen, if they didn't like the shirt you had on that day, they could say, no, you can't have a license to carry.
Jeez.
Or you can only have one to go shoot at a range or only go hunting. So there were all these different categories. Supreme Court said no. If you are not a prohibited person, then it is your right to be able to own a firearm, period, for your protection.
Right.
So a lot of I call them the hissy fit states, Massachusetts being one of the leaders, are doing all these Bruen response plans to try and get around because, let's face it, the politicians in Massachusetts are certainly more intelligent than those members of the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Well, I guess this leads to my next question. It ends up why they end up doing a lot of behind the back, behind closed doors, changing meetings at the last seconds, sending people, like in your book, when I was understanding it, when they were doing that tour that you were talking about, and it would be like all of a sudden people that were anti-gun rights were showing up at the meetings on time because they got all the updates, and then the people that were pro-gun rights were all of a sudden, they'd show up to the meetings and the meetings had been changed last minute, no notifications, and somehow it was always this, you're supposed to be doing it like this from what you said on your schedule, but all of a sudden there's all these changes and behind closed door meetings. So like, how does, I'm trying to say it in like a constructive way instead of just sounding like an asshole. It's frustrating to hear, I guess, is where I'm getting at.
It's frustrating to live through.
Right. And how do things like that happen? Like, how do they give you a timeline of saying, and then how do they get away with doing all that? And that, like, I get it. It's a one-party state. I know it's going to come back to that, but it's just frustrating to just hear that that's the...
And what I hope will come from this, and let's face it, the 2A community, let me face it, some of the very far right, okay? Fine. But then on the other end are the people, the, Moms Demand Action, Giffords, Everytown, all those groups, they have their priorities. There's no meeting of the minds there. They're going for what they want. But there's a whole population out there that's in the middle. Many of them are just, we don't care about guns, let them do whatever they want.
Sure.
Okay? But there are also a lot of citizens that I hope we reach that say, look how to bastardize society, look how to bastardize the laws. Take the guns out of the topic and plug something in that's important to you. Follow every one of those steps the way they did. Would you be happy that they pulled that on you? First Amendment rights, whatever. They'll, oh, you can't have a gas car, If they just come out and say, we're telling you can't have a gas car anymore. What are you going to do? How would you like it? Would you start fighting back?
Right.
And that's where I hope the citizens come about and say, no, we don't like you doing business this way. I don't care about the topic, you can't do business that way. They totally violated process here. and I think responsibility. I wish it were possible to sue politicians who pass bad law, and law that will ultimately be overturned. Why should they keep their jobs and keep doing what they're doing? Because they have you by the neck. They got the thumb on the back of your neck. You're not powerful enough to push it off.